The Enemy for Over 2,000 Years. April 6, 2020 by Anna von Reitz. A couple weeks ago I wrote a couple articles that exposed the fact that 1. The total atmosphere of this planet has lost 5% of the free oxygen it had available only 60 years ago. This means that oxygen accounted for 21% of the atmosphere back then and accounts for less than 16% now. That is a huge loss of available oxygen in less than the blink of an eye in geologic time. Ice and deep core soil sampling show that 120,000 years ago, oxygen made up about 28% of the atmosphere, and during the days of the dinosaurs made up an even larger percentage of the atmosphere. We have been steadily losing plant life and oxygen for thousands of years, and it's only getting worse. 2. The remaining oxygen we have available is being damaged and electronically denatured as a result of 5G resonance fields that are generated when the 5G towers are booted up to 61.8 GHz. Just like you can denature water or blood or alcohol by exposing it to strong electromagnetic fields, you can denature oxygen and render it less able or not able at all to properly bond to hemoglobin. 3. Finally, the hemoglobin molecule and its oxygen-carrying capacity can be changed and rendered less effective, too, so even though you are breathing in air, your entire oxygen transfer system is disrupted and not fully functioning, which leaves toxins behind and causes pneumonia-like symptoms and additional inflammatory response. You get sick not only because of, effectively, oxygen deprivation, but because of the toxins and inflammatory response that follows. This last bit of information is much more extensively explained in this article by Natural News. https://tinyurl.com/5G-exposure. But, as I was already familiar with these points, what really caught my attention was this almost offhand comment. Just as the Romans built their aqueducts out of lead linings and thereby poisoned their own citizens, driving them insane with load poisoning, the modern world of big tech and telecommunications is mass poisoning humanity with electropollution. Wait a minute, folks. Did you just take that in? Romans. What are we dealing with now? Municipal corporations of the city of Rome. Romans. The Holy Roman Empire, which, as Voltaire observed, isn't holy, isn't Roman, and isn't an empire, but which nonetheless derives from Rome and Roman history. Put that together with another Roman tradition, poisoning wells in Great Britain with loads of toxic metallic ores. Sounds like poisoning both our land and water with incendiary industrial metallic waste products via chemtrails, doesn't it? And another Roman practice of pouring tons of salt on arable land to render it useless and infertile forever afterward. Sounds like packing artillery shells with spent but still highly radioactive nuclear fuel and exploding them all over the Middle East, doesn't it? There is no doubt about the fact that when the Romans were defeated they were sore losers, petty, cruel, spiteful, arrogant, and wasteful. And they didn't spare their own citizens, either. They regarded their citizenry as totally expendable. So, should it surprise us that when dealing with these Roman municipal corporations, they adopt a burnt earth policy, and even though they intellectually, logically, know they are in the wrong, they nonetheless seek to inflict further damage on their victims as they withdraw and leave the poisoned and smoking earth behind? The reply of the so-called elites that if they can't rule the world and own it as their own plenary oligarchy, they will destroy it, now makes total sense. And we can stop hoping for them to see reason or relent, because, at least since the end of the Roman Republic, they were never acquainted with any sense of reason or justice. They have instead been full of a vain spirit of depravity and selfishness and destructive violence. Like 2-year-olds stuck in the me, and mine phase of life, they have no more mature response to offer, and like 2-year-olds with a hammer in a room full of glass, they have no imagination other than to destroy. They haven't changed. They haven't learned to care for or nurture anyone or anything in over 2,000 years, including themselves. Their answer to being thwarted and thrown from power to pollute and poison and sterilize is still the same. We are dealing with the same incorrigible, incomprehensible, infantile will to power that both built and destroyed the Roman Empire, and all the subsequent attempts of those aspiring to rebuild the purported glories of Rome as the Holy Roman Empire and then the various Reichs and now, here in America, found infesting the Defense Intelligence Agency, too. Let everyone take note. The enemy of humanity has not changed one iota. They still think the same way. They still believe the same things. They still have the same limitations and strengths. They still do the same things and have the same responses. And the enemy is still Rome, just as it was in the time of Jesus. Think of that. And the other enemy is also associated with Rome. The bar attorneys and the inner city of London and the lords of the Admiralty are none other than the galley, the priests of Isis, the bill collectors for the Caesars of Rome. Still doing the same thing the same way, too. No wonder current events have the stench and feel of Rome, the warmongering of Rome, the oppression of Rome, the depravity of Rome, because, even 2,000 years later and expressed in the form of municipal corporations, we are still dealing with the same mindset and methods as Rome. Now, that we know the mentality of the monsters we are dealing with, it should make it easier to recognize their works and all their ways no matter which religion they adopt today or change next week. This is an old, familiar enemy of freedom and humanity, dressed up in a new suit, just using more modern means to kill and poison and pollute and castrate and render infertile. They haven't learned a thing in 2,000 years. Their hearts are just as hard. Their minds are just as deluded. Their spirit is just as vain and contrary. And they are still prone to depravity, deceit, and criminality.